welcome to our adult Bible class here at Grace Lutheran on Sunday mornings. So we're looking at parables here in the summer. So they're all self-contained. And I said last week I wanted to do the one on the unforgiving servant, the unmerciful servant. You know, that's the one where he goes in and he has like $10 million in debt and the king forgives him, and then he goes out and the guy owes him $5 and he just threatens to throw the guy in jail. You know, that's that one. So it's a great one. But I actually wanted to look at this one. So this is Matthew 25. Thanks, Ben. Matthew 25, the parable of the talents. So it starts at verse 14. And so this is one of a series of 4 parables that Jesus is telling here. And the reason I wanted to shift to this one, we have a member who is so good to me, and she regularly says, hey, check out this YouTube, or check out this link. Because she'll watch it, or she'll read an article, and she'll say, I think this is interesting, or I don't know if I agree, or I wonder what your opinion would be on this kind of thing. So she sent me this link to a mega church pastor, and really his whole theme was the idea of everything that you need to be to succeed as a Christian is already inside of you, right? So God has already put all of that inside of you. And essentially, what I got from the thrust of the message was, so you just need to kind of be the person that God has now equipped you to be. And when I was done with it, I was depressed when I heard it, because I went, I'm not always succeeding. I mean, I've been a pastor for like 25 years, and I have not figured it out perfectly yet. How about you guys? Good? You know what I mean? So it's a hard message if I say to you, hey, all that's already in you. He used an analogy of you're either a chicken or a falcon, right? So chickens have lost the ability to fly, and you know, falcons are like they soar, and so essentially saying God has given you, all of us, the ability to be a falcon. And I'm going, what if I'm still pecking around on the ground, right? Does God not like me then, or am I failing God somehow, or you know what I mean? And it struck me because the idea of, and there's a good piece to that kind of message. In your baptism, God has, right? Called you His own, put His name upon you, made you part of His family. He's written you in the will. And you know, I guess there is a message that you would want to say to your own children. Hey, look, I've given you a college education, I've given you a safe home, I brought you up, I fed you, I gave you every opportunity. I want you, you know, I've given you all these tools and make it work, right? I mean, I think I've said that even. I mean, I think I may have already done that. But here's the difference. But if my kid doesn't succeed in all the ways I think they should succeed, do I therefore then stop loving them? I mean, in fact, I kind of try all harder. I mean, I may not, you know, it's not like I give them a blank check, but I invest even more, or my prayers are even more fervent, or I offer to walk beside them even more. You know what I mean? So I think even as parents we get that. Sometimes you have expectations or hopes and dreams for your kids, and you give them every tool to succeed. Sometimes they do, and you go, wow, that's awesome. Sometimes they don't. But does that mean for that reason then, in the same way, has God poured out His gifts on us? Sure. But I think when we're real honest, it's fits and starts, isn't it? It's ups and downs. And I am thankful when I look over the course of my life and I go, boy, God really was faithful with me. And I don't see growth a lot, you know, but I know growth has happened, you know. But boy, I almost wish it was like this. So the reason I find this parable interesting is I'm going to pose to you and say, the guy whose sermon I heard, who essentially said, hey, all the gifts of being a falcon are in you already, God's given you now, you should just make them work. That almost seems to be the tone of this parable, right? God gives these 3 servants each a hunk of money. I mean, a hunk of money and resources in order to do something while he's gone. And with varying levels of success. And in fact, the 3rd guy, who buries it in the backyard in a coffee can, you know, I mean, the owner, the master comes back and just lets into him. So you can't put it in the bank and give me a little bit of interest? Really? And so it almost seems like that's the message of this parable. Hey, God gives you talents, abilities, gifts, and then he goes away. And when he comes back, he would like to see that you have used those gifts in a meaningful way. Doesn't that seem to be kind of a basic theme of this parable? Here, let's read it. If you got your Bible, if you're online, want to look at it, Matthew 25, and it starts at verse 14. So Jesus is telling a whole series of parables about what the kingdom of heaven is like. He does this, so forth. So he says again, so this is the fourth parable. It will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Now real quick, just let me give a little Bible study note here. Some of you know this, a talent, just to be careful, does not mean ability here. That's how we get that word and its usage. Talent is simply a weight of measure, a measure of weight. And so, for instance, he gives, if you get a talent of gold or silver, essentially one commentator I read said, 1 talent is the equivalent of 20 years' wages. Okay? So let's say an average wage in Pocatello, let's say a living wage, an average wage, not minimum wage, would be, let's say, $40,000, right? Pay for your health insurance, maybe you could buy a house, might have to have a second income, but let's say that it's $40,000. Can you imagine? 20 years, $800,000. That a talent is like $800,000. Some people have said like $1 million. So the first guy gets like 4 or 5 million in resources to use, and then what's the other one? 2. So he gets maybe $150,000, $160,000, and then the last one gets just the 1 measly talent, right? Only about $800,000, right? So here we go, verse 16 then. The man who had, and then he went on his journey, went away. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once, immediately, put his money to work and gained 5 more. Did good, didn't he? Doesn't say how long it took him. Just says he put it to work immediately, and ultimately he doubled his money. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, and we don't know how long that is, but it's a long time, the master of those servants returned and settles accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you've entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. Isn't this interesting? Think about this. Let's say that the master has gone a long time. What do you think that means? But give me a guess. When you hear that, master's gone a long time, what do you think it means? 10 years. Okay. What do you think, Gene? 5 years? What do you think?
Probably 10, 20 years.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Good? Something like that? I mean, a long time is not a year or 2, right? 5, 10, 20 years, long time. I mean, for him to double his money, right? You know what I find interesting about this? If the master was gone like 10 or say maybe 20 years, don't you think the guy would think it's his money now? You know what I mean? Don't we act that way sometimes? Don't we act that way, right? The master gives us all this and then he comes back. And he comes back and he says, so what'd you do with my money? I can just imagine, because we're good Americans, right? What do you mean your money? You know, I mean, I earned that. You know, I earned that money. And so I just find it an interesting comment. But there's no question of that here, is there? There's no question of that. Hey, Elaine.
Hi, Jonathan.
I'm doing this Parable of the Talents because of McManus' sermon.
Oh, well, I
You
better.
missed my introduction. You'll have to go watch it.
Dang it.
No, it's good. It's all good.
No, I'm
But-
sorry I missed it.
No, but the reason I'm doing it is, remember McManus, kind of the idea is all the ability of being a falcon is kind of inside you.
Oh, yeah, that was.
And I find this interesting because I said to Teresa, I said, boy, the Parable of the Talents sounds like that, doesn't it? So we're in Matthew 25,
Thanks.
starting at verse 14. But the Parable of the Talents sounds like that. Hey, I gave you all these gifts. I gave you these abilities. I gave you these riches. I gave you this opportunity. And so you have it. Now, what are you going to do with it? I mean, that kind of sounds like what this is. Now we go to the second one, and the second one, same way. He got less resource. Now we're at verse, 22?
Yes.
The man with 2 talents also came. Master, you entrusted me with 2 talents. And I told what a talent is worth. A talent, let's just say in round numbers, it's worth $1 million. So a talent, so the one guy got 5 million, the other guy got 2 million, the other guy got 1 million, okay? So it's not like he got $50. That's kind of my point. It's not like he got $1,000. He got this huge investment, even the one with 1. So he got 2, you gained 2 more. Now, verse 23, his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Oh, I should have read that for the first one too. Same thing said to the first one, right? Isn't that interesting? I have put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. That's a comment that I found interesting because, you know, when you stop to think of it, let's say you're in this situation. So somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm heading off, but we're going to give Grace Lutheran $5 million. Do with it, you know, I'm going to trust this to you. Use it the way it should be used. And I'll come back someday, I don't know when. Off they go. It would be interesting if, let's say, we go then, we build a high school, we build an event center, we build a food bank, we increase the number of people coming to faith and to coming to school, and we're touching lives all over the region and everything. And when he comes back, look at what he says. Oh, I put you in charge of a few things, I'm going to put you in charge of more. You'd almost be like, what, I don't get a vacation? Right? You know, what do you mean? Because I succeeded at that, now I got more work to do? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I was faithful in that, now there's more to do. And that's how God works. God plants seeds, right? He plants seeds and looks for an abundance. And so it so often seems that we're kind of working to get done. And God is wanting us to work to do more, right? Working, and when we say work, I don't mean nose to the grindstone, punch the clock. I mean, it might be prayer, it might be conversation, it might be encouragement of others, but you get what I'm saying. It's not, okay, now I'm done. God is saying, no, I've invested in you to continue to serve, and so I trust you with many things. Okay, then you get the 1, right? Now here's where it comes to hit home, and this is where I think it speaks to that sermon that I listened to, that you shared with me. Then the man who received the 1 talent came. Now look at what he says, right? So, right? Master, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed. In other words, I did the work. You know, or those guys with the 5 and the 2, you didn't plant those seeds, you didn't harvest that, they did all the work. Isn't that an interesting perspective? So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I haven't scattered seed? Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. I mean, on $1 million, even that after 10 or 20 years. Even in our current climate where you get whatever, 1%. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Ooh, harsh, right? Seems like a very harsh punishment for a guy who didn't lose a nickel of your money, right? So what's the point of this? Listening to that sermon that you shared with me, Elaine, it was interesting because he said a lot of good things. There were good things. I did want him to stop yelling after a while.
yeah, I didn't like that part either. I told you that. I got tired of him.
I just get tired of preachers that yell. Yeah, I get tired
It's
of
like you don't need it, right? I mean, at some point it just falls on deaf ears per se.
yeah, just wears me out.
Yeah, there's no point in it.
But, so there were some good things he said, but the idea of, is this a correct model for the Christian? You have been given much, but each of us differently, right? Each of us has different abilities, and honestly, that is where we get the idea of talents, that you have talents, that comes from this story. And so that's been translated to one with many talents has been entrusted with much by God. Right? But anyway, in this case, it literally means an outpouring of property, resources, money. And so is that the Christian model? God has given us much, therefore we should put it to work in God's name that we might return to Him an abundant harvest. And if we don't, then is the penalty to be cast into hell, right? I mean, I don't know, how else can you read that? Throw them outside in the darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So are we cast away from God. What is the third servant's great error? And what is the first two servants' great understanding? What is most important to know if you're in this parable? If you're one of the three who receives a talent.
I think it's that God is good and gracious and wants to give you more.
Correct.
I mean, it's, the other guy views God as, the judge and it's law.
Fearful.
Yeah.
Almost as I have a good excuse not to do this, right? Because he's hard. So I'm not going to take any risks with this. Which really means, so you're exactly right. I think the heart of this parable is not, hey, different people have given different talents. Some people are really gifted and some are less gifted. Don't worry about that. They're all gifts from God. There's some good teachings in this. But the heart of this is, what is your understanding of the master? Right? What do you think the master is like? That's why Jesus is telling this parable. Because he's telling it to people, think about his audience, right? So he tells it to people, a wide range of audience. There's either people who are teachers of the law, Pharisees, and the scribes, and they were knowledgeable synagogue rulers and leaders. And they're sitting there saying, I'm playing by the rules. And so I'm playing by the rules. This is how I'm going to earn my way. I'm earning my keep with my master. And so I got to do this. I got to be good. I got to do those things. And then you have this other group of sinners who have probably given up. They're like, I'm tax collectors. I'm gone to the other side. I'm in the dark side. Or the prostitute, or the person who's despairing, or the person who feels lost or abandoned, or the leper, or the sick, or whatever that is. You have these people who say, I've blown it so bad, there's no way I can be right. And so the idea that's so critical here is that they understand the character and nature of the master. I mean, look at what he says. Master, I knew you were a hard man. It doesn't say anything like that in here. You have no hint that that's the case. In fact, the exact opposite seems to be true, doesn't it? The master's going off. What's he doing? He's giving away his property. I mean, the opposite of a hard man. It seems like you were an amazingly generous man. And so I think it's a fair and honest thing. You can be sure how neat would it be to have had a lengthy interview with number one and number two also, who probably said, well, I took a risk. I wasn't sure if it was going to work out. I hoped it was right. I sought some good counsel and I got some good advice, but it didn't always go great. But we kind of hung in there because I knew that's what the master would want me to, that kind of thing. It doesn't mean it was all Skittles and rainbows, along the way. But we don't have that interview. What we have is the third man who says, Master, this is the kind of person that I believe you to be. And the opposite is in fact true. Now the sad thing is, he confirms that the master is a hard man, because by failing to see that he's in relationship, right, that the master wanted to be in relationship with him, then the master, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that particular case. You did blow it. You did blow it because you failed to see the kind of man I am. So I gave you all this time to be able to do this way. And so it's interesting because with that part where he says, for everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. And we almost go, well, just doesn't seem fair, or that just kind of seems mean. What it is it's just kind of almost it's almost, this is just how it is. For the people who know me, and the people who are in relationship with me and know my grace, all they get is more. They realize there's more, and there's more. Because in my grace, it's kind of like when we say, you can't diminish love by loving someone. All it does is increase in abundance. I mean, this sounds really sappy, because now I'm a grandpa. It's crazy how in love with that little dude I am. I mean, it's just crazy. I feel like really lame sometimes, because he just disarms me completely. I'm just madly in love with him. He doesn't do anything. He just spits up on me, you know. But so I think that's the nature of what God is saying. I want to give you more. I am a master of love. Haven't I shown that to you with my generosity and my care for you? Look what I gave you. Yeah.
What do you think, I'm trying to understand the scripture where it says, I need my readers, getting old.
I hear you. I take my
Where it says, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. I mean, what does that mean?
Oh yeah, no, it's one of those views of God that kind of says, yeah, you left. So you just kind of gave this to us, expected us to do all the work. That's how many commentators read it. I read it that way too. And he's wrong. He is incorrect here, but that's his faulty view of God. And many people have that view of God.
I see.
God is this distant God, he's disjointed. It's remember the big controversy, you know, when President Obama said, you didn't build that, you know? There's a whole bunch of people that are involved in a thing that happens. And while I think he was a little tone deaf and it didn't play very well, there is some truth to that. I don't sit here as your pastor today because I figured it all out and I was so stinking smart, all by myself. There are a lot of people in play, from my teachers and my parents and those that cared for me and so forth. Yeah, I mean, that deposit was given to me and you used that work, but many people seem to think, hey, you made me do this all on my own, God, where were you? So that's why you're a hard master. You ditched this on us, and then you took a hike.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a failure to recognize the huge piece of this. Once again, the law and the people that are driven by the law, right? How much money did you make the master? How well did you play by the rules? What kind of fruit did you produce? That economy is law-driven, right? It's transactional. It's transactional. What he's talking about is you fail to see how much I love you, how much I entrust you, how much I want to have a relationship. This is where I think McManus was wrong, or where he made me uneasy on that sermon, Elaine, where he says essentially all this, it almost seems like, hey, God has put this deposit in you, now be the falcon you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And
I want to go, I never think in those terms. Like I was sitting there we were listening to in the hotel room waiting to do the wedding. I was down in Salt Lake area doing a wedding yesterday. It was cool, not cool, what a bad pun. It was sticking hot. I have not sweated like that. And it was outside, 98 degrees, it was crazy. I'm wearing black, I said, oh, that's stupid. But but we're sitting there in the room, and I said to Teresa, I never, with you in my marriage, in my relationship with her, I never think I'm keeping score. And that's the nature of a love relationship, right? You're never keeping score. When you start keeping score, you go, there's a problem. There's a big time problem. Like, what have you done for me lately? Or how come you won't take out the garbage? Or whatever, you know, you start keeping scores. And that's the problem. The first two, I think what Jesus is modeling is, the first two get it. What you gave me, I return to you with abundance. Thank you for entrusting it to me. And the master says, good job. You were faithful there. Let's do some more. You know, let's do some more. And I think God is saying that to his church all the time. I've given you everything you need. I've given you all the things you need. I'm not keeping score. It's not a bill, it's not an account, it's not a bill, it's not a balance sheet. I'm in relationship with you. I want you to trust me as if I am a loving father. And it's a parable which reveals that positive truth from a negative perspective. In other words, the third guy gets it dead wrong. I knew you were a hard man. No, he's proven he's a trusting, generous man. He just gave away all his fortune and entrusted to you schlubs. You know? He's proven, so no, you're just wrong. Harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where, what do you mean? He's just scattered all of this all over the place. You know?
You know, the part, and it's
Yeah.
a kind of a disadvantage, because these guys haven't heard this guy's sermon, but, you know, the part that I really liked about it, and I wanna know how that plays into this, is when he started talking about, we're not talking about bad versus good,
Oh, yeah,
it's
just,
old versus new.
right.
And I think that's pretty profound, right?
It is?
And the newness enables us to be falcons, right? But that's not, it's God's work making us from old to new.
Correct.
I mean, I get what you're saying about that, and even at points I almost felt like, you know, it almost could be new age-ish, you know?
Yeah.
The part of the go do it yourself, or God within you, or whatever, I mean, that's,
Right.
but God does live in us, right? But it's not like Shirley MacLaine's God within us, you know?
Right, he said a few things that made me uneasy, where he said, you know, you are the essence of God, and this, you know, reflection, we are, I mean, here's the problem. You know, with the chicken and the falcon analogy, I love our tradition that says, look, if you're honest, sinner and saint, same time, all the time.
Mhm.
It's not like I'm a chicken and now I'm soaring to be, I'm becoming a falcon. Sinner and saint, I'm wrestling all the time. Thank God. I mean, I love that quote from Luther where he says, so the devil comes to you and says, you're a jerk and you're a sinner and you are undeserving and you are hateful and rebellious and you do not deserve the love of God. And you say, yeah, you're right. What of it? I have a Savior who has said I am his own, who died in my place, and he considers me of tremendous value and worth, so you go take a hike. So yeah, I am, but I'm this. So for me, it's not an either or, in the same way with good, bad, and old news, not either or. I didn't like that he made them oppose each other. They don't oppose each other. It's almost like, because boy, you can get into a weird place when you say, all that old is bad, and now this new is good. He also went through that whole rant on all these denominations. And I am never a fan when you smack down other people. I just am not a fan of that, you know. But it is a good point to say Jesus really does focus in on your measuring stick is wrong. In other words, you're measuring your relationship with transactions, good and bad. How many goods, how many bads? So you're measuring your relationship with transactions. No. It's a new thing that God is doing because you screwed up the old thing. That was really the thing. You screwed up the old covenant. Doesn't mean the old was bad, but the new thing now has to take precedence because the old thing broke. So now, goods and bads, being good or bad, those are the results of being in relationship with Christ. So we just measure poorly. We measure poorly. I'm a good Christian because and then fill in the blank. I'm a good Christian because I go to church all the time. I'm a good Christian because I tithe. I'm a good Christian because I don't swear, or I don't smoke, and I don't hang out with people who do. You know, if that's your measuring stick, and forgive me, there are too many faith-based systems for which that is the measure, right? I measure my relationship with you based on the goods and the bads. So they are transactions. That's how good I am with you. Now your bank is happy with that, right? How many deposits do you have as opposed to withdrawals? And if your deposits exceed your withdrawals, your bank thinks you're awesome. They like you a lot. But that's not how it works with God, right? God is far more. Now with our children, right? Do we long for our children to be that way too? To continue to grow and mature and produce fruit? Is God calling us that? Sure. But that's not what makes us his children. It's because we're his children that those things happen. That's the difference. So this is what I think Jesus is really doing. He highlights the third guy that says, this is how you guys are acting with God. You're acting like this guy. You're scared of God. You think he's a judge. You think he doesn't reap where he sowed, that God is hard-edged. No, God wants to be in relationship with you. And if you lived in a love relationship with him, you'd do what the first two guys did. That's the difference. Jesus is contrasting a transactional encounter with God as opposed to a relational encounter with God. That's the difference. And I just think it's fascinating how the third guy reveals it. You're hard-edged, and this is how you are. You're mean, and you don't do the work, and then you count on us to produce something, so I didn't take any risks, so this is exactly what you gave me back in your hands. And God just goes and says, you whiffed. You missed the point. I mean, imagine if your marriage relationship was that way, right? I'm going to give you back exactly what you gave me. That's just how that is. It's an even balance sheet. As long as we're in an even balance sheet, then we're good. Oh, that's sad. That's just horrifying. That's just so sad. So anyway, that's, and I wonder what other questions I have. Oh, what do you think the master's opinion of his servants is? I thought this was an interesting one. I think it's interesting. What do you think? What's his opinion of these three guys? Heading off on a long journey, calls them together. I don't know, he's a lot less controlling than I would be. I mean, he just divides up his property in different ways. Essentially, there's not a lot of instructions. There's not a lot of, I'm gonna be checking in on you every quarter. You have to do reports to me.
Why do you think he didn't give them equal shares?
Well, traditionally, commentators say, and I tend to agree with this, life is not such that all the resources get chopped up. If there's 100 people, they don't get chopped up into everyone gets 1%. It's just not how life seems to pan itself out. What is a key principle here is no one gets a meager portion, right? The smallest amount given here is about $1 million.
In a way though, you know, I mean, it's like you talk about the guy going in on a stretcher gets the same inheritance as somebody that was baptized and was faithful, you know, whatever.
Well, but this guy is clearly not even on life support.
No, but I'm just saying the giver didn't, I mean, the master
Yeah,
didn't give equally, and I mean, we receive equally.
Oh, receive and the reward at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, I get you. Yeah. I don't know that it's the amount. I think it's God longing for us to use what he's given us. But it's how we use it. In other words, it's given out of relationship of love and trust, not out of fear. I now have to do this thing because I'm fearful of the master's reaction.
In some respects, to me, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, you know, it's like the master knew who was gonna do what.
Yeah, God certainly does. You always have to be tricky in parables.
I know,
I
but
mean, it's always, you have to be a little careful. But
that,
no.
that's my point, though. I mean,
Yeah.
agreed. I mean, the parables to teach something
Mhm.
about God, and he didn't give equally, and
Well, and that's an interesting thing you say, though. Yes, he didn't give equally, but to all he gave liberally. No one was shortchanged. When I say this, it's not like the third guy was given $1,000. I mean, or even that. I mean, they were all given with abundance.
I think it's a little bit like the lost son, you know, or the prodigal son, with the older brother, you know?
Well, and
It's sort of a similar thing.
Mhm. And in that one, the older brother is given the 5 talents. Because the younger brother got a much smaller portion. He got his inheritance, and it was a chunk of change.
But the older brother was still mad at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And he was mad for a whole variety of reasons. This one, and that one too, is trying to tell you, the prodigal son is trying to tell you the nature of the father. Far more on the quality of the sons. It's much more on, do you understand the nature of God, the master?
Well, that's really what this is about too.
Exactly right.
That's why I'm saying there,
Exactly
it's
right.
sort of similar in terms of inheritance and all of that.
Right, I agree. Now, but the key difference this one is, so I think you're exactly right. In the parable of the lost son, once again, it's trying to tell you the character of the father. He is willing to give the inheritance up front. He does long for his son to return. When his son returns with a repentant heart, he restores him fully. He restores him completely. So there's lots of differences in this one. And the elder son doesn't understand the nature of his father either. I mean, because the father just kind of pleads with him, you already got everything I have. Everything I have is yours. So don't you get that? But he was dead, and now he's alive. I want you to celebrate that. I want you to understand how happy that makes me feel. So for those of us that have the riches of heaven, we need, in the prodigal son, God is longing for us to understand how joyful it makes the Father when one sinner repents, right? When one person enters into the glory of heaven. In our humanity and our sinfulness, we somehow think that detracts from our inheritance, right? He's horning in on my inheritance, instead of realizing that God's inheritance multiplies with the more people that come into his inheritance. And so I love this here. The 5 got 5 more. The 2 got 2 more. That's a kind of an exponential. And I'm going to put you in charge of even more stuff. I'm going to give you even more opportunity to see abundance. But to the one who gave 1, you just didn't get who I am. In other words, you already are outside of relationship with me. So it's almost not like, in other words, the whole time that he came, that the master was gone, it almost, I imagine that the guy worried the whole time when he comes back. Why did he give me this? I don't know what to do. Oh my gosh. What will happen? He probably checked on his burial spot like every week. Is it still there? Did anyone find it? What if someone takes it? What if it's not here? While the other 2 guys are just going, boy, the master was good to us. He entrusted this to us. We're going to go for it. You know. I just think it's the difference. It's in operating out of relationship as opposed to out of transactional expectation. So that's a cool parable. They all try to tell us something. I have to stop because he's got to get the stream going for the other one. So thanks for that. We'll keep going each week. Just going to do a different parable. So here's hoping for the unmerciful servant next week, unless I change my mind again. Any last questions? Are we good?
What's the name of the minister's YouTube sermon?
Oh, Erwin McManus. Erwin. He's
But-
pastor of it's called Mosaic. It's a kind of a mega church in Southern Cal.
Do you remember the name of the which sermon let me look it up.
It's all inside you, or it's already in you.
Let me look it up and I'll tell you, because I sent it to Pastor Dooner. a couple
And
weeks
honestly,
ago,
he
a month
says
ago.
a number of really neat things. But here's my bottom line. If in the end, I go out with the message in my mind, boy, I need to get busy on that. Because if I don't, I'm either failing God somehow or myself. Okay? As opposed to what I want you to go out saying is, what a great Jesus I have. And mine is far more risky. Because I can tell you all in sermon after sermon, you better get on that. God tells it to you right here. You better get on that. And if you're not keeping your end of the deal. Look how good God has been to you. You should be that good. You should keep striving. And all I think that does is add rocks to your backpack. My method is different. Our method and our tradition is different, where we come and say, what a great Jesus you have. Because then we stop. Because what we hope is you're gonna then say, boy, that is great. God loves me in spite of me, He welcomes me. It's not because of what I've done. What could I do? That's the difference.
Yeah, it's All in You, and Erwin is E-R-W-I-N, McManus, M-C-M-A-N-U-S.
So there's lots of good things in there,
Yeah.
but, and that.
I just
that's-
was curious,
Yeah.
because the John Gordon guy that, you know, I've learned about through Idaho Central is, he came to faith through this guy.
Yeah, and I can see that. I have to stop, because he
Yeah,
has to get
that's
on, so I
cool.
gotta turn it off. Let's say the blessing, and I'll let you go. We can chat a little more for you two. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make His face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up His countenance upon us and give us peace. Amen. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Happy birthday.
Is it mine?
I don't know, I thought so.
September.
I think it's Liz's birthday.
Whose is it?
Liz
Oh,
Bollinger.
Is it Liz?
Yeah, they dedicated the flowers.